you have been standing between two frequencies without even realizing it. One part of you still clinging to the familiar that has held you for years, while another part whispers that something is trying to move. And it is this space between the pulses that holds the most important stage of transformation. It is not the rush of excitement or a burst of motivation, but a kind of static, like turning the dial of a radio and catching fragments of two stations at once. That is the true signature of expanding awareness. If lately everything familiar has begun to feel blurry, and what once felt solid now feels uncertain, it is not that you are on the wrong path. This uncertainty is a sign that the structure of your energy is reorganizing. Many people panic thinking they are losing control, but in truth they are entering the state where the quantum field begins rearranging probabilities in preparation for a collapse into a new configuration. That is why you are here now, not by accident, not just because of an algorithm or a habit of clicking similar videos, but because the field inside you has reached a resonance strong enough to draw you to this exact frequency. Look back at the times you promised yourself you would live differently, that you would respond calmly instead of reacting, that you would trust your intuition instead of doubting it. And yet a few days later you found yourself back in the same loops. That disappointment makes many conclude that change is impossible. But failure here is not personal weakness. It is that willpower cannot override a field generated by many layers of consciousness at once. You may think new thoughts, but the unconscious is still broadcasting the old frequency more strongly because it has been reinforced thousands of times. In quantum physics, there is a principle called superposition, when a particle exists in multiple states at once until it is observed. Your life is the same. Right now there is a version of you repeating the old patterns and another version dissolving the shell to enter a new configuration. You are in the static between them, and the oscillation you feel is not chaos but preparation for the inevitable collapse. This is the moment when you often hear phrases like be stronger, be more positive, but you have tried and realized thinking differently is not enough. The issue is not motivation but resonance. When your inner and outer states begin to match, you receive small, dense signs like hearing the same phrase 3 times in one day, or seeing the same theme repeat from different sources. These are not just selective attention, they are the field responding as you reach coherence. This coherence is proof you are no longer confined to the old configuration. Instead of resisting and running back to safety, see the uncertainty as evidence that you are on the right process. A person between two frequencies may panic because they feel they belong nowhere, but one who understands the mechanics recognizes this as the golden stage where every possibility hovers waiting to be chosen. You do not need to see the whole future. Absolute clarity now would only stop expansion because the mind would rush to cling to one image and shut down other probabilities. Allow yourself to stand in the unknown like freshly tilled soil, empty but ready to receive new seeds. As you slow your breath and let your mind observe instead of merging, you will notice a subtle space. Thoughts of worry and feelings of tension still appear, but you are no longer them. You watch them drift like clouds. That space is the beginning of quantum power because you are moving from being the experience to being the awareness. This is the first foundation for choosing a new frequency. Imagine someone living in the same room for years. The walls are the same, the objects the same, but one day they notice the light through the window feels different, the walls less solid. One new look is enough to reveal the room was never a prison. So too, when you begin to see the looseness of the stories you believed were absolute, it is not loss. It is space opening for a new configuration to take shape. The truth is you are not stuck. You are in the in-between, and this in-between holds all potential. Every static, every contradiction, every doubt is a sign that you are moving. Many people rush back to the old simply to feel safe, but you do not have to. True safety comes from knowing that uncertainty is the doorway to expansion. Right now, notice your breath. Inhale slowly for 4 counts, hold for 4, exhale for 6, pause for 2, then repeat. As you do, name the most vivid emotion you feel without analyzing. Just call it like an old friend. Instantly, you will see it no longer controls you. It simply passes through. In that moment, you have stepped out of merging and into the observer. That is the first step of coherence, the first step of choosing a new frequency. So if lately you feel tired of old loops, like you are in a familiar room but can see a new door appearing faintly, you are in the right place. You are here because resonance has pulled you, not by chance. The field is responding and rearranging your life, waiting for you to be brave enough to say, I choose the new frequency. You are not lost. You are standing at the threshold where 2 frequencies meet. Do not try to end the uncertainty quickly. Let it remind you that another configuration of life is ready to collapse into. From the moment you realize this, you are no longer trapped. You are in the very center of your rebirth. You once believed that with enough willpower and discipline, everything would change. That if you stayed positive long enough, reality would be forced to shift. Yet after countless attempts, you still found yourself repeating the old patterns, falling back into the same familiar loops. This is not because you are weak or lack determination. It is because you have been trying to use a thin layer of conscious will to fight against the vast power of the unconscious. Imagine a great instrument with many strings, each vibrating with sound. If you only tune one while the others remain out of harmony, the entire melody is still discordant. Willpower is just one string, but the unconscious memory, belief, emotion, even ancestral imprints are the others vibrating much more strongly. And it is those deeper layers that determine the frequency you emit. In quantum physics, there is the concept that a particle exists in many states at once until it is observed, and your life is the same. You exist simultaneously as the version who has not changed and the version who has already been reborn. The issue is that you often observe only with reason, while the strongest signals come from emotion and deeply rooted memory. A person may crave abundance, they may visualize prosperity, they may build vision boards, yet inside they carry the belief that wealth corrupts, that they are unworthy, that happiness belongs to someone else. These unconscious signals carry greater emotional charge and drown out the fragile voice of willpower. The quantum field does not respond to the words you say once in front of a mirror. It responds to the frequency you emit continuously and repetitively through daily emotions and beliefs. If willpower says I want, but the unconscious whispers I fear, then the field reflects fear because that is the dominant frequency. You have experienced mornings when you felt resolved to begin anew, only to find yourself exhausted by noon and slipping back into old habits. Not because you lacked persistence, but because willpower is only a small fraction, while the unconscious runs nearly 90% of daily experience. This may sound discouraging, but in truth, it opens an important doorway. For if you rely on willpower alone, change will always be temporary. But when you learn to approach the whole system, when you create coherence between conscious and unconscious, between thought and feeling, change becomes natural and lasting. Instead of believing you must force yourself harder, recognize that you must create resonance throughout your entire energetic field. When every layer speaks the same signal, the field has no choice but to mirror it back. Remember, the issue is not what you wish for, but the frequency you emit. If you long for love while broadcasting lack, you will meet those who confirm that lack. If you long for prosperity while emitting anxiety, you will encounter more reasons to worry. The field does not judge it, only reflects. Real change begins when you adjust the root signals you are not even aware you are sending. The question is how to reach the unconscious. The answer is by becoming the observer rather than merging. Each time emotion rises, instead of instantly believing it is truth, simply name it silently, as if naming a passing cloud. Instantly you step out of the old signal and create a gap to choose another response. Small as it seems, repeated often, it begins to recode your entire field. That is, when coherence starts to appear, when you are no longer pulled by unconscious signals, but begin to guide the whole system. Neuroscience shows that just before breakthrough, the brain enters turbulence, as if the old system must destabilize before the new one can emerge. If you feel chaotic, frustrated, disoriented, do not conclude you are failing. See it as a signal that you are near the threshold of transformation. Willpower can ignite the process, but coherence is what carries you across the bridge. You must accept instability rather than resist it, for it is the way the system prepares to reorganize. And once resonance reaches a certain threshold, the field responds through external events that look like coincidence but are the direct result of the signals you broadcast. Then you realize it was never willpower that changed your life, it was resonance itself. Let this become your new belief that you do not need endless struggle, you only need to tune your signals so the whole system sings in unison, and from there, the external world naturally rearranges. This is the truth most people miss because they fixate only on the surface of consciousness and forget the ocean of the unconscious beneath. Once you understand that willpower is not the only key, you stop blaming yourself, stop believing you lack strength. You begin to see that lasting change is the product of harmony, not of force. And from that place, a subtler power, more enduring, begins to rise in your life. There are moments in life when you begin to notice something strange, repeating signs appearing around you, as if the world is trying to speak a language you have never understood before. You might hear the same familiar phrase 3 times in one day from a passing friend, from a book that falls open at the right page, from a conversation on the radio. At first you tell yourself it is coincidence, yet deep inside there is a different sensation, an intuition that this is not random chance, but the quantum field responding directly to you. Most of us have been taught to dismiss such phenomena, raised in a world that worships linear cause and effect and treats every event as mechanical logic. But reality is more subtle than that, because the quantum field does not operate by linear logic. It works through resonance, where when your inner state reaches a certain frequency, the outer world instantly reflects it back to you through what you call synchronicity. You have felt this before, thinking about someone only for them to reach out unexpectedly, wrestling with a decision and then receiving 3 different signs pointing in the same direction. You may call it intuition, chance, or synchronicity, but the essence is coherence, when inner and outer are in such alignment that you start seeing yourself reflected in the mirror of reality. The problem is most people do not believe this message, assuming the brain is simply filtering and exaggerating coincidences. But if you observe closely, you will notice the precision and repetition are far too delicate to be mere illusion. Recall a time you were unsure about changing jobs and suddenly you heard a story of someone who dared to leave their comfort zone. Then a few days later stumbled across an article, a video, a conversation, all circling the same theme. When repetition becomes strong enough to make you pause, know the field is speaking to you. This is the language of synchronicity, a language not written in letters, but in the arrangement of events, and it only appears when you are ready to listen. Neuroscience sometimes calls this pattern recognition, the brain suddenly seeing connections between signals, but from the quantum view, it is evidence that when you expand your awareness to receive a new possibility, the field arranges reality to reflect it back. This means you are not just a passive observer, you are directly participating in creating what becomes visible in your life. When a person begins to change from within, they start to see repeated words, familiar symbols appearing, and these are not external signs being sent, but reflections from the inside out. The most important truth here is that synchronicity is not only a message, but also an invitation to act, because if you merely notice without changing the sequence, repeats more strongly like a lesson unfinished. So each time you see the same theme returning, do not stop at surprise. Ask yourself what action in your life needs to shift into a new frequency to respond to this message. If you ignore it, the field will continue sending it, even through more pressure crises, conflicts or losses, always to make you face the truth that you are ready for another possibility. The simplest practice is to write down within 48 hours the repeating events you notice, list 3 coincidences, then write a short present tense statement reflecting the message you feel. For example, I am trusting the process, or I am ready to open to a new possibility. By doing this, you are collaborating with the field instead of just observing, turning synchronicity from a sign into a guide. You will see something remarkable happen when you act on that message. The sequence becomes denser, faster, and your life begins to flow as if guided by an invisible current. This is the language the field uses to lead you, and when you learn to read it, you will no longer feel alone, because you realize reality is always communicating, always responding, always patiently inviting you forward. You no longer have to strain to calculate every step, because you have a guidance system encoded in the very structure of your experience. When you stand in coherence, each repeating sign is a fragment of a mirror, and when you piece them together, you see the full picture of your path, not because someone outside told you, but because you have become resonant enough to hear the voice of the field reflected from within. This is the delicate power of synchronicity, not a distant miracle, but the natural operation of a reality where consciousness and experience are not separate. And from the moment you recognize this, you will no longer treat coincidence as random. You will understand that you have just learned to read an ancient language. The universe has always been whispering to you. Every journey of transformation comes with one of its hardest demands: to create space for the new to take root. You can read hundreds of books, listen to endless advice, practice all kinds of techniques, but if your life is still crowded with old habits, old relationships, and old beliefs, no new configuration can stabilize. Reality is like a garden. If the soil is still choked with weeds, no matter how many seeds you plant, nothing will grow. This sounds simple, but it is the greatest challenge, because we cling to what is familiar, even when it drains us. People keep jobs that no longer nourish them just because they feel safe. They stay in relationships that make them small out of fear of facing loneliness. They hold on to stories about themselves that they must work twice as hard to be worthy, that they will never be enough, because the fear of the unknown always feels greater than the pain of the familiar. But if you want real transformation, you must learn to release. And release is not. Loss release is creating the space for the field to reorganize your life. Remember that a seed cannot grow into a tree unless its hard shell dissolves. That shell once protected it, but now it must disappear so new life can emerge. Your life is the same beliefs, relationships, habits that once kept you alive must now dissolve. If you want to step into a new frequency, for only then can space open for a different configuration. We often mistake safety for holding on, but clinging to what is outdated is what keeps you from feeling safe. You are not unsafe because you let go. You are unsafe because you keep carrying what has expired and no longer resonates with your current frequency. When you first step away, it feels difficult, as if the ground you knew is gone. You feel empty, confused, sometimes as though you are falling into a void. But This is the stage where the soil is being cleared. That emptiness is not punishment. It is the space required for new life to emerge. If you can be patient and trust, you will see that out of emptiness come the first signs of freedom, a lighter breath, a clearer thought, a subtle curiosity about new possibilities. Courage to release is often misunderstood. We imagine courage as a dramatic decision that changes everything, but in transformation, courage is built from quiet choices that no one else sees. It is choosing to switch off your phone early so you do not drown in noise. It is declining a meeting that would only exhaust you. It is dropping the story that keeps repeating in your mind that you are not good enough. Each small choice creates more space for the new frequency to dwell. You do not need to abandon everything at once, but you must be honest about what in your life makes you contract rather than expand. Each time you identify and release one such thing, you clear more ground for transformation to root. And then something remarkable happens. The emptiness that once frightened you becomes relief because you are no longer dragged by the old. When you dare to live with less, you discover you have more energy, more creativity, more presence. This is the paradox of letting go, losing what no longer serves you, allows you to possess what was always yours. Think about a relationship you held too long, knowing it drained you, yet you stayed because you feared the emptiness after it ended. All that time you poured energy into maintaining a broken structure. Only when you release do you see space for new connections, new people, new experiences. And anyone who's been through this will tell you that the void that once terrified them was the very door to freedom. The same is true for habits that weigh you down, whether procrastination, the obsession with control, or an overloaded schedule. Each time you release one such habit, you free not just the act itself, but the energy bound to it. And the moment you have more free energy, the field immediately reorganizes to draw you into a new configuration. Few speak plainly about this truth that to evolve, you must know how to dissolve. Every rebirth begins with dissolution. Just as the caterpillar must melt into a cellular soup before becoming a butterfly, you too must allow your old protective layers to dissolve. It may feel like you are, losing yourself, but in truth, you are becoming a greater version of yourself. When you understand this, the fear of release turns into reverence for the process. You begin to see emptiness as fertile ground tears, as needed rain pain, as the crack where light enters. None of it is the end. All are rituals of beginning. So ask yourself, what are you still holding, even though you know it no longer resonates? Which relationship, habit, or story makes you contract instead of expand every time you think of it? Remember that when you release, you lose nothing. You simply make space for what truly belongs to you to arrive. The field never leaves a void. Unfilled, it always fills it with the frequency you hold. So true courage is not clinging to what is known. It is allowing uncertainty to open the way. Courage is agreeing to let the shell dissolve, to let the soil be tilled, to give the seed a chance to live. When you can do that, you no longer need to force evolution forward by creating space. Evolution happens naturally. This is the art of release, the art of space, and the essential condition for any transformation to become real. There is a truth few people state clearly, that change does not come from explosive breakthroughs or sudden bursts of motivation that fade away. It comes from small but consistent steps, steady actions repeated day after day until they crystallize into a new configuration in your energy field. People often search for instant solutions, for secret techniques, but the reality of the quantum process always demands stable resonance. And that resonance can only be created through a simple yet profoundly powerful trinity of practices. Observation, breath, and space making. This is not some exotic technique or mystical tool. It is the only way to re-establish coherence throughout your entire system, from conscious thought to unconscious memory, from reason to emotion. When you practice observation, you stop identifying with passing thoughts and emotions. Instead of letting them control you, you take your seat as the witness. This alone creates a subtle gap, a space where you are no longer swept into automatic reaction, a space where you regain choice. Try it for a single day. Each time you feel anxious or angry, instead of reacting immediately, simply say to yourself, I feel anxiety, I observe this anger. In that instant, you shift from the old wave into the position of frequency adjustment. Breath is the bridge between body and mind, the only function that runs unconsciously yet can also be consciously directed. By adjusting your breath, you send a direct signal to your nervous system that you are safe, that you can release tension. The 4-4-6-2 pattern is the simplest. Inhale for 4 counts, hold for 4, exhale for 6. Pause for 2, repeat 5 times. After a few cycles, you will feel the body soften, the mind quiet, and your inner energy shifting from chaos to harmony. That is when coherence begins to emerge. But finally, creating space is the step most often overlooked, yet the most essential. If you observe and breathe, but keep the same lifestyle, keep filling your schedule with non-resonant tasks, keep allowing draining relationships to occupy your field, then the new frequency has nowhere to take root. Creating space means honestly examining what needs to be released, even if it is something small, and replacing it with an action that nurtures the new frequency. One day you might drop 15 minutes of scrolling and replace it with 15 minutes of writing down what you are grateful for. Another day you might decline a shallow social invitation and stay home to breathe in silence. These small choices are what actually shake the structure of your field, because they are consistent signals that you are prioritizing expansion. When the 3 practices combine, you will notice that change does not strike like lightning but flows like a river, gentle yet powerful, gradually pulling you into a new frequency. Many give up thinking they are not progressing fast enough, but if you maintain this trinity daily, you will see yourself shift not through dramatic moments, but through a growing sense of peace, through choices that feel increasingly natural, through the arrival of opportunities and people that reflect the frequency you are now holding. The strength of the Trinity lies in the fact that it requires no force. You do not need to strain to change. You simply need to perform these 3 steps consistently, and coherence will form naturally. That is why the great teachers have always emphasized discipline over intensity. 1 deep meditation once a month cannot compare to 10 minutes of daily observation. A luxurious retreat cannot replace the steady creation of small spaces in everyday life. The quantum process does not respond to grand gestures, it responds to regularity. Look at nature. A seed does not need a violent storm to sprout it, only needs a few drops of water each day to maintain moisture and gradually crack its shell. So too, your life does not require a dramatic event to transform. It requires the steady repetition of small acts. Observe, breathe, create space. And you will discover something remarkable, that when this trinity becomes habit, you no longer feel you are trying. Change begins to unfold naturally, like flowers blooming when spring arrives. That is when you know you are no longer searching for transformation. You have become the transformation itself. There is a common mistake people make when speaking about change. They imagine it as a linear journey, step by step, from point A to point B, believing that the more they walk, the closer they get to the goal. Yet reality is far more subtle, because in quantum mechanics, reality does not advance like even steps on a staircase. It moves through sudden collapses of probability. This means you do not have to struggle through countless stages to reach where you want. You only need to create enough coherence for the field to collapse into the fitting possibility. That is why the greatest transformation does not come from running toward the future, but from thickening the present. You may have heard the phrase, live in the present, but few understand its depth. The present is not just the moment you are breathing, it is the intersection point of all possibilities. When you are fully present, when you focus all your energy into this moment, you make the present thick, meaning richer, stronger, with the power to collapse into a new probability. If you are scattered, always thinking of the past or worrying about the future, you make the present thin. You drain the energy needed for the field to reconfigure. And so you continue receiving repeats of old scenarios. And imagine someone determined to change their life. They keep planning, they think about a better tomorrow, they dream of a perfect version of themselves, but each day passes in distraction, in old habits, in lack of presence. Every morning they wake up with tangled thoughts. Every night they fall into worry, living somewhere outside the present. Without gathered energy, they cannot collapse a new probability, and so their reality loops. Now imagine someone begins to thicken the present. They start with a small ritual, writing a present tense sentence connected to a bodily feeling. For example, I am living with clarity and peace. They write it not as a wish, but as a reality already here. They then remove from their schedule one meaningless act, an action only serving to maintain the old, and replace it with 15 minutes of nurturing the new frequency, maybe writing, maybe meditating, maybe simply walking in silence. The next day they repeat. No need for grandeur, only steady repetition. After a week, their present has changed, not because of external shifts, but because each moment has become denser. When the present is thick, the field begins to respond. New probabilities become visible opportunities. Once impossible appear, doors no one expected open. This is not magic. This is the mechanics of probability collapse. When you pour all your attention, sensation, and energy into the now, you make a specific possibility dominant, and the field must collapse into it. This explains those sudden moments when your life turns sharply, without warning or logic, but with perfect precision. It is the result of a present made dense enough, coherent enough. Many think they must know exactly what to do 10 years ahead, but the truth is you only need to know what to do right now. The future is not created from distant thoughts. It is created from present moments, made dense. Each time you concentrate and pour energy into a moment, you plant a seed in the field, and that seed collapses into reality in unexpected ways. You can try it today. Write down a present tense affirmation, remove one constricting action, add one nurturing action, repeat for 7 days. After a week, you will feel the difference, not in grand achievements, but in the sensation of your present becoming richer in energy. And it is that richness that creates real change. And you will begin to notice synchronicity becoming denser, people you meet echoing what you feel inside, small opportunities reflecting the state you are cultivating. This is the field responding, confirming your present has thickened. Continue, and the density will reach a point where it collapses into an entirely new timeline. Once you understand this mechanism, you stop rushing. Change is not about running ahead, but about making the now complete. When the now is complete, the future must change. This is the art of collapsing timelines, the art of choosing probability by gathering your entire energy into this moment. We have spoken much about releasing the old, creating space for the new, thickening the present so the field can collapse into a different possibility. But there is a deeper truth behind all of these processes, that no transformation becomes truly sustainable until you begin to live from the observing self instead of from the roles you once mistook as who you are. Human beings spend much of life building and defending stories of identity. The story that I am a successful person, that I am a failure, that I am a victim, that I am strong, that I am a parent, a lover, an employee, a leader. These stories are not false, but they are roles, not essence. The problem is that when you fully identify with a role, you are trapped in a fixed configuration, and any change feels like a threat because it means the role might disappear. This is why people fear dissolution. They believe that when the old story collapses, they too will vanish. But the truth is, there is a part of you that has never changed, the part that has witnessed every rise and fall, every emotion, every success and failure. That part is the observing self. And when you begin to live from this place, you realize you no longer need to protect any identity. You no longer need to strain to maintain an image or defend a role, because, all roles are temporary expressions on the stage of consciousness. Recall a moment when you were overwhelmed with emotion, maybe anger or fear, and then suddenly you realized, I am angry, I am afraid. The instant you could name the emotion you had stepped outside it, you were no longer the emotion, you were the one observing it. If you expand this ability, if you begin to live each day from the position of the observer, you will taste a freedom no identity can provide. When you live from the observing self, you become a clear mirror for the flow of creation. Ideas arrive and depart, emotions rise and fall, opportunities appear and fade, but you are no longer defined by them. This clarity is the secret of what is called effortless manifestation, the realization of experience without force, because you no longer build walls of resistance, no longer emit conflicting signals between what you desire and what your unconscious believes. When there is no wall, energy flows freely, and what you once struggled to chase now finds you. You will notice ideas flowing when you sit in silence, opportunities appearing without your pursuit, the right people entering when you are no longer desperate. This is not escape from responsibility, it is engagement at a deeper level. When you live from the observing self, you still act, but action no longer comes from lack or fear of loss. It arises from wholeness. Your actions become natural expressions of a frequency already complete, and so they carry creativity, liberation, and are free from strain. Try today when a situation confuses or worries you, instead of rushing to fix it, step back and ask who is observing this. In asking, you remind yourself to return to the observing self. From there, everything lightens because you are no longer bound in the script. You are the witness of it unfolding. Like when you watch a film, you may cry or laugh, but you are not the character. You are enjoying the performance. True freedom lives there in the ability to experience fully without needing to identify. When you live this way, a new kind of grace appears. You feel supported by something wiser, more loving, more expansive. Some call it grace guidance, divine arrangement, but you will know it is the natural outcome of no longer resisting and allowing the observing self to lead. This is the most subtle turning point of transformation, because it takes you beyond every story and returns you to the place where all stories arise, pure awareness. And from there, you see that life is no longer a battle to become someone, but a dance to express the vastness already within you. Every quantum process follows the pattern of a spiral, not a straight line. You may have experienced many expansions, many releases, many moments of standing as the observer, and then one day you notice the old lessons return, familiar situations, replay emotions you thought were gone, resurface. Do not mistake this for regression, for in truth you are moving on a spiral at a higher level, meeting the same themes from a broader perspective, and that is the very sign that your transformation is stabilizing. The universe never punishes it, only offers you the chance to revisit old lessons at higher frequencies, to integrate them fully. This is what many do not understand. They panic when mistakes repeat, thinking past effort was wasted. Yet the reappearance is the opportunity to anchor the new frequency more deeply. When you face the same challenge from a new state of consciousness, you are signaling to the field that you truly have changed. Think back, perhaps the first time you confronted the fear of rejection, you avoided or reacted explosively, but after practice, when the situation returns, you are calmer, more observant, less identified with the wound. That means the frequency has been more firmly anchored within you. This is how the field checks your stability, by sending back chances for repetition. The key is not to see repetition as an enemy, but as a test to measure your own strength. This world always mirrors your inner state, so when a challenge returns, ask, how have I changed compared to before? That answer is the real measure of progress. To make this stability last, you must sustain daily practice, not through force, but through gentleness, like tending a flame. Observation, breath, and space making no longer remain techniques, but become a way of life.